So welcome everybody to week 3 of the Business Analyst Series 2023. We're excited you're here. So we again have a 90-minute packed session with our experts who are going to be talking about the topics for today. And the questions that you have, if you would please put those in chat and keep yourself on mute as we're trying to make sure that we have a clean recording. And then if you're also encouraged to put your information on LinkedIn or for LinkedIn in the chat box. And if you have any questions outside of this session, we just encourage you to put it on forum.uipath.com. We will be monitoring those and responding to any questions you guys have. And with that, I'll go to the next slide. So again, today we have myself, I'm Diana Gray, I'm the Community Marketing Manager for America. Christina Vadu, who's the Global Manager for the Marketing Community. We have our partner here, Manjula, who is the founder of The Next Innings. We have Mukesh, who is an MVP for UiPath, as well as he works for Boundaryless. And we have Aswathi, who works with our Academic Alliance. So we've been through 2 sessions so far. This week it's happening now. We'll be recording this and it will be available tomorrow. And we will be sending out an announcement at the end of our session so that you guys are aware of where that recording can be found. So today I'd like to welcome Christina Avram and Nupur Anani, who are our speakers this week. They both work with UiPath and are experts in their field.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So we'll just go through this really quick again. They're going to be covering process mining and task mining this week. And then at the end of this week, you guys are required to finish your self-studied courses, which are indicated here, getting started with UiPath process mining and UiPath task mining overview. And then Wednesday, we'll have our Menti quiz. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina Nupur.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time and your efforts throughout this series. So as Diana mentioned, my name is Nupur Anani. I'm going to be joined with Christina, who's also a senior product manager here at UiPath. We are part of the Discovery Suite. So really excited specifically to touch on 2 big topics around discovery today. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and just start and level set a little bit of an understanding around where we're looking at discovery. So let me just pop this open into presentation view. So as we go ahead and look into some of the areas of discovery at UiPath, we're going to focus on process mining and task mining. But I think one of the things that's really important is to reiterate where this falls into the larger scheme of the platform. So as you can see here, we have our platform side between our 3 pillars: discover, automate, and operate. Within discover, you can see there's process mining, task mining, comms mining, and then this idea of idea capture and management, generally captured by Automation Hub. Now, when we're considering how we really build an automation pipeline, that's where Discover really comes into play. And so for us, this is particularly relevant for folks that want to go ahead and dive into automate and operate, that they still do their due diligence here in this discovery area. And these tools are really embedded to create that opportunity so that you can figure out where you should be not only optimizing your ROI and your automation, but even looking at other types of process and task improvement. So we're going to talk a little bit about how, you would be able to use this by leveraging every different data source that you can really look at to get quality data to drive those insights that help you then determine, okay, is this a good opportunity, whether that's a process or a task to automate? What are the inputs to going into automating it? What are the context pieces that I need? And then what's the potential ROI of automating that as well? And that's really what process mining, task mining, comms mining, and Automation Hub do. Now, as you consider each of those, it can be a bit confusing since the nomenclature is very similar with all of them saying mining, but really what you're looking at is different kinds of data sources. So I always start here with process mining, which is mining data from business applications. Process mining is taking that data from server-side application logs and applying it to a process visualization or leveraging AI or its own types of algorithms to do that. So you can see here in this example, this might be something like an order to cash or a purchase to pay end-to-end process that you have using a large ERP software like SAP or Oracle, and we're helping you visualize it to find those bottlenecks. Now, task mining is a little bit different. Even though we're doing similar visualizations, it's a little bit more at a different scale. So task mining is looking at it at a smaller scale and specifically looking at a data source that is different. So again, process mining was that data source that was directly from the business applications, whereas task mining says, hey, maybe you don't have the data source available. Maybe your legacy application doesn't have logs available, or maybe your task at hand goes across a ton of different applications and you don't want to aggregate them together. So we're going to mine data from the desktop directly. Primary difference here, right, is the source of data. So mining data from business applications versus mining data about the business applications, but from the desktop activities. This third kind here is then mining data from business conversations. So comms mining is really helping us leverage new kinds of AI and things like NLP to go ahead and look at different kinds of data in the way that you interact so that we can figure out really how that impacts the larger business process. So again, quick review. Process mining is coming from those server logs or the application logs. Task mining data is coming directly from a desktop. It's actually coming from the machine as you complete the different activities within the task. And then comms mining is coming from the information related to the actual communications, whether that's Outlook or other kinds of communication methods. Now, the reason why we put this one at the last is because really this is where all of it culminates together, which is Automation Hub is where you're taking all of the different ideas from the data and the insights that you've gotten in those first three, and you're putting them together in one centralized location to drive your backlog. And this is really about being able to capture that high priority ROI idea to go ahead and either convince your COE, or if you're that COE person, go ahead and actually automate for it. I'm going to keep moving forward here just so we can make sure that we have enough time later for questions. But really, again, if there's anything you take away, I think from this slide is that these are the components that really contribute to our discovery suite. And the primary differences, again, for those first three are the source of data. That's how we differentiate those different products. Now, each of them obviously have their own value adds and features, but really it is the source of the data and the types of data that you're looking at to drive those insights. Now, as we're going to get started, that was really just a level setting as to looking at discovery products and what continuous discovery is, how it's integrated. Christina's going to kick us off with process mining and also looking at maybe even why you might discover some of these use cases. And then we'll go into task mining and we'll go from there. So I'll hand it off to you,
Sounds
Christina.
good. Thank you. Let me share. All right, so now that Nupur presented high level what continuous discovery products are, let's dive into a little bit more detail with process mining. So process mining is a powerful tool that is going to help us to drive data-driven decisions whenever we have digital transformation products or initiatives in our organizations. So there are frequently the situation where organizations don't know how their processes are actually executed, and it's very difficult to understand how the process is behaving in real life. So as a result, initial planning and the expected results need to be updated whenever reality hits and we learn more things about how the actual processes are behaving in real life. Another interesting challenge is whenever we have automation initiatives in our organization. Sometimes we are trying to automate a process that is not happening in reality as we are initially thinking about. So we start automating it, and then we see a lot of change requests that are required to be executed.
Can we please
Okay.
keep on mute?
Yeah, muted
Sure.
it's okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
And basically, we then have to do a lot of change management in order to modify that automated process and make it um, match the real scenario that is happening in the real life. Then another interesting use case is whenever we are trying to automate a process that is not the most efficient in the first place. So whenever you are going to automate in that direction, definitely you are going to improve the overall process, but you are not going to automate the best version of that particular process. And this can lead definitely to RPA project failure. So this is why we strongly believe that process mining is very important whenever we are having digital initiatives in our organization. And here there are some examples of why the current capabilities that we are normally using whenever we are trying to map our efforts are falling short whenever we are trying to understand exactly what is happening. So for example, business intelligence tools are great whenever we are building reports, but how helpful are they actually whenever we don't know what story we are trying to tell or what is the issue that we are looking for? So here, for example, in one of the conversations that we had with our customers, we were looking at the logistics process, and they had quite a lot of rework that was happening between the storage and the conveyor belts that were completely automated. And that rework was completely hidden away from them whenever they were trying to use BI tools in order to analyze that particular process. So process mining showed them, hey, this is a problem that you have. And then if they want to continue to monitor that over a longer period of time, they could potentially build those BI reports to keep an eye on it. Then whenever we are thinking about interviewing in order to map the processes, this is something that is helping us to identify maybe some high-level issues, but never is going to allow us to have enough data in order to build a business case to advocate for a particular process improvement and negotiate that business case with our stakeholders. And usually what we are seeing through interviews is that we are identifying perceived problems, and some of those problems might be subjective or isolated to certain parts of the process. And in the same time, we don't know exactly how prevalent that problem actually is in reality, and is even difficult to prioritize that particular problem against other problems that are happening in the process, in our organization, or in another organization in the company. Manual process mapping is another popular tool that people are normally using whenever they are thinking about the digital transformation initiatives. But this is usually very time consuming, is resource intensive, and in the same time is only capturing parts of the process. And in the majority of time, we see that a lot of the things are going to just fall behind or fall through the cracks just because we are identifying the process as it should be executed and not necessarily the process as it happening. And spreadsheet analytics, you can definitely figure out that this is another limited capability that is not offering you enough information in order to continue with your initiatives. So this is where process mining comes into play. As Nupur was mentioning before, process mining is able to connect to your actual data source and is extracting the information directly from the source system, and it's transforming the information in a format that is easily processed by process mining. And usually whenever you are thinking about this entire data ingestion process, you as business analysts are going to be the ones that are going to work with the data engineer in order to identify what are the fields in the data source that you should use in order to identify your case ID, for example. And that case ID could potentially be an invoice ID in our example. So once we have that initial data connection, then process mining is going to help us to show what the process actually looks like. So we can see here what is the most common variant. We can see what are the activities that are happening less frequent. Some of these activities might be activities that we are expecting to see. Some activities are going to be activities that are completely new. And in the same time, we can also analyze some high-level KPIs that are relevant for our business, like the performance, the number of variations, the number of events that we are analyzing, and so forth. Now, process mining is also enabling us through all the capabilities and functionalities that is offering to also uncover high return of investment opportunities. So here we can detect what are the things that are taking a very long time, and things that we could potentially automate or improve through a different way. So these are bottlenecks. We can identify what are the things that have a high potential for automation and are going to save us a bunch of money and a bunch of time from our workers. And in the same time, we can also identify deviations that could potentially put our entire company at risk. So with all the information that we have available, basically we know what are some of the potential opportunities for improvement. We can quantify how big these opportunities actually are. We can act on these particular insights, and by acting on the insights, we can either automate or we could potentially re-engineer our process in order to improve it. So with process mining, we are able to, first of all, automatically discover our business process and understand how they are executed in real life and compare that with the actual to-be process. And this helps us to gain complete transparency into our process and get a common understanding between multiple stakeholders and establish a common language whenever we are discussing about digital transformation initiatives. Then we can definitely identify where the bottlenecks, inefficiencies, deviations, and risks are appearing in our process. And using data-driven approaches, we can quantify the impact of these issues in our process, and we can also uncover what are the improvement opportunities. For every improvement opportunity, we are able to identify and quantify the potential impact of either fixing the issue or automating it. And using our AI-based root cause analysis capabilities, we can identify the root cause of that particular thing, and we can identify the right mitigation strategy. Now, with all the improvement ideas identified, we can decide to take action on it, and we can start to prioritize among these ideas and understand how we can improve the process holistically. So this is where the integration with Automation Hub and automation potential simulation capabilities come into play to support the prioritization effort and to improve the process. As we are mentioning, we can re-engineer or automate it. And what is also extremely relevant and important for process mining is that we can use process mining in order to continuously monitor how our process is behaving. So we can implement changes, we can monitor what impact those changes have on the process. We can use compare functionality to see how the process has changed over time. We can see how the KPIs have been improved over time. And we can compare these gains with the initially estimated return on investment that we were thinking about. And we can actually see whether we have improved the end-to-end process or not. What is also important is that you can also establish SLAs. Those SLAs can be continuously monitored, and we can ensure that we are not missing any SLA through capabilities like due dates. And we are going to look a little bit more into them later. We can also monitor the unwanted deviations and potential anomalies that might occur in our process. And once we are identifying a particular unwanted behavior, we can then take action in order to eliminate it and remedy it. We can notify the right people, or we can employ the right actions. So with the continuous monitoring capability, we can shorten the feedback loop whenever we are implementing changes in our process, and we can adapt our processes to changing business conditions whenever it is required. So process mining can be also applied to a plethora of processes. These are some examples that we are currently supporting out of the box. Examples of processes and source systems that we are supporting. But these basically serve as inspiration or a starting point in your journey with process mining. What is worth mentioning here is that these are not going to eliminate the opportunity to do process mining on top of a normal application that could potentially be custom. And what is also very important whenever we are thinking about discovery products is that they are designed so that they are able to work together. So for example, if we start in process mining gives us a high-level view of the end-to-end business process. But at some point, if we have one particular step in process mining that requires a more detailed analysis, we can rely on task mining in order to understand what actual users are doing in their day-to-day job in order to perform that particular activity. And then if we are thinking about situations where we have incident management and we are dealing with tickets that are coming from customer service, then we can apply that information that we are getting from the tickets into the data that we are analyzing in process mining to understand what is the sentiment, what is the customer satisfaction in our customer service center, and things like that. And all of these things, as Nupur was mentioning, are feeding off ideas to Automation Hub that you are basically using in order to prioritize improvements. And then through prioritization of improvements and computing the return on investment, we can then go into the automation part of the platform, and we can automate parts of the process or the entire process, or we could decide to actually optimize it. So I think it would be also relevant to spend a little bit of time just to look into the process mining application. So let me just close this. And I think this is maybe the best way for you to understand what is happening in process mining. So here we are looking at an application that is looking at claims, and these are warranty claims. And what we are able to see right from the beginning is this particular view where we can see the end-to-end process. And here we are looking at almost 6,000 cases if we are looking at this, and then we can see what is the most popular path. So the claims are going through this particular statuses whenever they are processed. And as we are progressing and we are increasing the level of detail in our process, we can identify what are the things that are added here. So maybe we are going to see some rework patterns. It looks like this particular state is repeated for a huge number of times. Then we can see some activities that are moving back and forth. So it seems like this particular process is assigned, and then some additional information is requested, and then it's assigned again. So maybe these are also things that we want to look into. And we can zoom in as much as possible to get the full view of the entire end-to-end process. And this is a fairly simple process that we are looking at. In addition to this, we can also see additional information about what is the frequency of the variations that we see in the data. So a variation is basically one end-to-end flow of how that particular process is executed. So here, for example, we can also see how this particular variation is comparing to the rest. So you can see here that variation 15 is the one that is represented by scenario A. And then we have all the rest of the variations that are represented by scenario B. So just by looking into this, we can see that the activities in the center are the ones that are common across both variations, both scenarios, but we have some activities that we are only seeing in the rest of the variations, and we can also see what is the impact on the top level KPIs. So this is one way for us to look at the data. High level information we also have in other features. So from a business analyst perspective, SLAs are important in our end-to-end processes. So for example, in my particular example, I configured some SLAs to check whether my claims are processed on time. And what we are able to see is that around 6,000 cases are on time, but also around 6,000 cases are also late. And these are cases that we can then try to understand in a little bit more detail and understand what is happening with them. And for example, if we are using the root cause analysis capability, we can see, for example, that whenever we are looking at the claim type, we can identify what are some high significant KPIs for this particular on-time late filter. So we can see that the cases that have a high claim type, probably this is the priority, are also the ones that have a higher likelihood of being late, which is a problem in a normal process. And then we can dive into a little bit more detail and try to figure out whether this is something that is maybe related to the error code. So for example, we can see that the error code 15 is the one that is very strongly correlated with the actual claim being late. And these are the types of inputs or the insights that we can get out of process mining just by drilling a little bit into the analysis itself. And then we also have the capability of tracking business rules. In process mining, we are calling these business rules actual tags. And for example, in our situation, we are interested in claims that have been assigned to multiple people. And we can see that we have a pretty high number of cases that are in this particular situation. And then we are also tracking claims that have been reopened. So this is basically a situation where one of the claims was not successfully processed by our team, and the customer had to get back to our customer service, and they had to reopen this particular claim. So definitely this could be correlated with negative customer satisfaction, and we would like to understand in more detail what is happening here. So I can even try to filter on this, and we can see, for example, how the actual process data looks like. So here we are looking at one warranty claim, and we can see exactly what are all the statuses that this particular claim was going through. So for here we have is new, and then it was evaluated, and then it was assigned, and then it was evaluated again, and then we told the customer that this was denied, and then this particular claim was closed. So we can see exactly how long this particular claim is staying in every single status, and what is the sequence of activities in this particular situation. So in a nutshell, this is a very, very brief introduction into process mining and what are the capabilities that are available here. And we can spend a little bit more time into the Q&A section in order to respond to specific questions if there are any.
Yeah, Christina, I think there's some specific questions around the data ingestion or like how you got this data, for example, in this template. If you can maybe speak a little bit to the connectors or the different types of data ingestion pipelines that we have, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, of course. So this is a very good idea. So normally, whenever we are in a process mining application, we have multiple ways of connecting the data. So Whenever we are creating a new application, we can see multiple application templates, and basically the application template contains some dashboards that are specifically created for one particular type of process. And we are also having all the data transformations that are needed in order to convert the tables from the source system, in this situation, Oracle, to the event log that we are using in process mining, and that is mainly identified through the case ID, the activity name, and then the timestamp. So whenever we are selecting one type of application, we can give it a name. And what is interesting here is that we could potentially also include here CSV or TSV files. So this option could potentially be available for users that are using a custom system behind the scenes. So you could add a CSV folder, a CSV file that is in the right format for process mining, or you could upload your data using an extractor. And this is where CData Sync and Theobald Extract Universal are coming into play. These are tools that normally the data engineers in your teams are going to use. So CData is providing a connector to the majority of the source systems that we are supporting right now. So basically, you are logging in with a particular URL, you are providing a username and a password, and you are connecting to your actual data source. And then CData Sync is the one that is extracting the data, and then the data transformation step comes into play. For Theobald, this is another extractor, but this one is specifically designed for SAP. So all the SAP applications are going to require these connectors. And what is important is that these connectors are coming with the process mining license, so they don't require additional licensing. And they are going to be installed in your local environment, just because we don't want you necessarily to connect to your data source over the network and have a lot of security issues whenever you are interacting with your data. And basically, once in our situation, if we are going to use the sample data, then the application is just going to be created behind the scenes. So it's possible that whenever you are starting an initial process mining project, it's possible that you are going to iterate a couple of times through the activity names that you are using, through the mapping to the local source system, just to make sure that you are getting to the right level of detail whenever you are looking at the process graph. Because there are situations where maybe some intermediary activities you would like to collapse into a bigger activity just because they don't matter so much from the end-to-end business perspective, business process perspective. So you would like to have a more high-level view on your process. And in other situations, maybe you want to go into a little bit more detail. But this really depends on what is the purpose that you have with the process mining project, and also what is the type of process that you are looking at. So
Awesome. I think that answered a lot of the questions for the most part. One of the things that I was wondering, Christina, if we could touch on is back to your slides, is really how do you decide when you should start with process mining versus task mining versus comms mining in that discovery process of looking at, replacing manual redundant interviews?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So maybe we can collaborate on having some insight into this.
Yeah.
So I think definitely, as you are mentioning, the source system is one of the things that are key here in identifying what we are trying to do. But definitely, as we are starting to understand what is missing in our analysis, we can decide to bring in more communications mining data, more task mining data, more process mining data. And I think our journey itself can start at any point in time. So we can definitely start with task mining and then dive into process mining if we want to look at bigger end-to-end processes. But yeah, I would say it really depends. What is your perspective on this?
I totally agree. I think it totally depends. I think, yeah, the source data is a big one. I think the other piece is, the just the capacity for data ingestion and analysis. So sometimes for folks, if they have that capacity, it makes sense to start with something like process mining at a macro level and then drill down into detail from the task mining level. But then I think if some folks don't, task mining might be an easier entry into it. With comms mining being supporting of that. And so it's really just about the capacity of your organization to be able to ingest the data as well as digest that data when you're analyzing it, and at what scale you want to start with your use cases. Throughout the I think entire life cycle of a COE, what we've seen is regardless of where you start here, and you can kind of tell with this image, which is the process mining, task mining, comms mining, going into Automation Hub, is it really doesn't matter where you start with there. Automation Hub is kind of that centralized place you're always going back to. And most folks start right off the bat with, having Automation Hub, because you don't want to also start getting excitement in your organization around an automation idea and miss that opportunity. So you want to be able to document it right away, get it into Automation Hub, at least have it be there so it can be realized ROI later, even if you don't tackle it right away. So I think regardless, you want to have Automation Hub running at all times. It's really dependent then with the other pieces, how you want to start.
Yeah, and I think here what is also very important would be to understand exactly what are the skill sets that you would need for any of your projects. So maybe task mining is going to be something that you could potentially start a little bit easier just because you have to find the right people that are executing a day-to-day task on their desktop machine, and you can send them an invite, and Nupur is going to walk you through that. Then for process mining, we are going to require people that know how to connect to the data source, and then people that know very well the process. So we have to make sure that in the core team that is going to implement an initiative around process mining, we have at least these two people around together with the business analyst to actually get the real value from our data. And for communications mining, we would need to have someone that is knowledgeable enough about the actual communication patterns so that they are able to be involved in the end-to-end flow and being able to label the data so that then our machine learning models are going to extract the right information and the right insight for you. So it is important at every step of the way to make sure that we have the right people involved and that we are collaborating cross-functionally in our organizations. And in the same time, it's very important to have a very clear objective and have stakeholder buy-in, because the majority of the time we are going to discover insights, but the question is how we are applying those insights, how we are making changes, how we are measuring that we are moving the needle in the right direction after the insights have been identified. So it's really important to also tie into that continuous monitoring loop and make sure that we know exactly that we are getting the right value from all of these products.
For sure. For sure. Awesome. I think if that is the content that you had for process mining, we can probably move towards task mining before we then open it back up for more questions.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
I will go ahead and share here. All right. So we've talked again a little bit about process mining. And again, I keep reiterating the same thing, but it's that we moved here through the process mining slides, that we have a different source of data. And we really want to look at, again, depending on where you are in your use case, might depend on where you go with how you start. But generally what we found is that task mining is a fairly easy entry into discovery because of the different types of ways that you might collect that data. Now, again, with this, we're looking at scalable desktop data collection. So I'm going to show you in a second here exactly how we even collect that data. And then this idea of being able to be human in the loop to guide the tool exactly where the data and what you'd like it to be, as well as then having those actionable insights and governance throughout the entire time frame of it. But here, really what we're going to talk through is the best practices on how to decide who to record and capture data, how you actually get that idea of capturing data socialized in your organization, to get folks, buy-in into being able to capture that data and provide you with really rich insights, and then analyzing that data. So first and foremost, really thinking about where we start. And I think obviously with us talking to you folks as business analysts, we know that this is a big part of what will help accelerate your role in helping you get actionable insights to the COE as well as to the business. But beyond that as well, automation leaders, developers, and employees themselves benefit from being able to see this level of detail and data insights. Particularly what we see here is, this is starting to capture data that a lot of folks have some prior assumptions around, but maybe don't know the details around. And so really understanding in a low touch way how to be able to collect that detail and then drive ROI is particularly helpful for those user personas. Now, again, we're mining desktop tasks from a multitude of different applications. So right off the bat, the use cases I always start with are common tasks that folks are doing that span across multiple applications that maybe don't have those application logs available. So common ones we automatically see are, Microsoft Suite tools, anything that you're going between an ERP to a Microsoft Suite like Excel, and then you're going into a Word document, and then maybe you're going into a browser. Those are great examples of things. You can see here, this is an example of using email and then going into a document in SAP. Now, it's not to say that it has to be SAP, right? SAP is an example of a large ERP. It could be a proprietary or legacy application that's a little bit smaller. And the reason why you want to capture the data is because you haven't had the opportunity to get those server logs or those application logs. And so really what we're looking at is groups of folks that are working in tasks that are across multiple applications and being able to visualize it to find those high automatable opportunities and then even some potential bottlenecks. Now, you can see here right off the bat that there's a few people being captured here. So generally the scope of a task mining project is that we are looking at a set of people. You'll scope it down into really what you decide you want the size to be. I'll give you some frameworks of best practices, but it really is up to you as to what the right people are. And this is really what comes into play of the best practice of identifying business SMEs who have a variety of different experiences as well as a variety of different approaches to the task. So right off the bat, if I had this idea to use task mining, I'd want to find a department. Let's use the example of the finance and accounting department. And we're looking at invoice processing. I'm going to find folks who have either been with the organization for 6-7 years plus from that, maybe a new person. I might actually look at different geographies as well. I might say, hey, there's somebody in the US doing this, but there's also someone in EMEA doing this. Getting a variety of inputs will help you determine really how the task is being completed in all of its different variations so that you can decide how you want to automate for it. So I might go ahead and decide exactly how I want to capture. Now, once we've done that, or who we want to capture, we want to determine then how we want to capture. Now, this is going to be a little bit of the approach within the product that you choose. Now, on the left is really the entry into task mining, which is assisted task mining. It's our newer thing. I kind of mentioned it to folks as the evolution of task capture. Now, assisted task mining is particularly helpful when we have the identified task already. So for example, I knew that I wanted to look at invoice processing. I knew I wanted to look at different variations in that flow because we wanted to consider it for automation. I just didn't know exactly what those clicks or types were. Maybe I use assisted task mining to do that. Now, unassisted task mining, which is generally what you've seen us provide in the market historically to date, is going to be a little bit more around the idea of, hey, I know the group of people and I know that they're doing some stuff, moving data between maybe Outlook and SAP and some other things, but I'm not exactly sure what the task is itself. So I might look at that scope of the small group of people over a period of time. So really what we're doing is collecting data over a period of time. Now, the key here is that regardless of what approach you choose, you're still using a desktop recorder to collect clicks and type actions. So we're going to talk about how to actually deploy that and what it looks like to look at that. But regardless is what approach you're using the same recorder. We've actually packaged them together so that they're accessible exactly in one MSI installation. You can access both assisted or unassisted. Think of this also as another way of thinking it as assisted is more of a bottoms up approach. Hey, you know the tasks, so and so. Can you go ahead and just capture a few variations? Whereas unassisted is a little bit more of a top down approach. Hey, I'm in charge of finance and accounting. I want to go figure out what and learn a little bit more about the folks in that organization. I'm going to go record them for a period of time and use AI to really find where those repetitive tasks are. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at a demo of how you might set up one of these projects. I am going to start with unassisted task mining because your academy course and your certification focuses a little bit more on that. And then I'm going to pivot to assisted task mining because I really do think that that's an easy entry point for you to get your hands on the keyboard and get experienced with it. So let's go ahead and move into an actual demo environment. Now, what I've done is I've made this available in a cloud demo environment that I'm using. Just to call out from a logistics perspective, we do have task mining available in both cloud and automation suite. The one kicker here is that only unassisted task mining is available in automation suite. So assisted, the second thing I'm going to show you, it's not available in automation suite yet. We are working on getting it available. Now, when we're looking at this, and I'm going to skip over the first bullet point because that's actually a private preview that we have available. I'm just going to jump right into assisted or unassisted task mining. Now you can see here that we have the option to either capture the known, which is what we know the task is right off the bat. We have some ideas, but we maybe need to validate the ROI. Or we really just want to look at mining the unknown or understanding a little bit more about a group of people we have some ideas around. So let's start with unassisted task mining. We'll just call this the BA series test. And right off the bat, we have this opportunity to invite our recording users. Now, one thing I've probably done before I've even really gotten in the product is I've started to think around who those users might be. And like I mentioned, a handful of users. We're looking at about anywhere from like 4 to 10 for unassisted task mining to really get some good insight. And what we've done is we've probably identified offline, hey, these are some folks that have that variety of experience or have that different geographic location that I think will be helpful. And we can go ahead and add them. And we can see here, if I add Christina, I can go ahead and add her here. Now, what's going to happen when I add Christina and after I click this, and I'm going to show you in a second before we go through recorded applications, is she's going to get an email inviting her to this project. Now, that's really her entry point into this to say, hey, business me, I'd like you to help me capture some data. Let's go ahead and get this installer on your machine and get it captured. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. But before I do that, realistically, if I'm capturing data over a period of time, I need to set some scope around it or some boundaries around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with one of the business me's, maybe Christina, maybe somebody that's a business leader that knows the finance and accounting process a little bit at a high level. And I'm going to figure out what applications I really want to focus on. Now, this is two things, really. One, it helps us scope down the noisy data, make sure that we don't capture data that isn't relevant. But more so, it really helps to build confidence with somebody like Christina who says, hey, I'm not so sure about you capturing all my data on my desktop, right? And I can say, hey, you know what, Christina, you're right. I'm focused on a set of applications. I'm not so focused on, your Microsoft Teams or your Slack. And so what I might do is actually explicitly deny Microsoft Teams or Slack. Now, what that means is that when we deploy the recorder, it will not capture data for that. So we might say slack.exe, or we might put in the domain for Slack here. Now, by explicitly allowing things, what we're also saying is, hey, this is a scope or a bucket around the data that we want to focus on. So we might look at just Excel, and we might look at SAP, and we might look at our proprietary website, for example, for our website. But this is a really key piece to put some boundaries around this. Now, the way that you go define these boundaries is you really have to go talk to those business me's maybe once or so, or maybe you talk to that department leader and understand what the boundaries are. They're going to know, hey, folks are spending time in a bunch of applications, but we really don't need to collect their teams, chats or interactions. Or, hey, actually, folks do use Teams as a way to look at the different task pieces and move data between it. So we might need to interact there. Now, what's wonderful here is that once we've done that, it pretty much is just automatically going to go ahead and create my project. Now, on the other side, what I've done is I've invited Christina. So Christina actually just got an email and she got an MSI recording application in it. And actually,
yes, most of them don't. You saw the resume that guy did for me now. He had
open the email. And I'm going to show you what a task mining invitation generally looks like. So when we are looking at a task mining application, let's see, share my screen. We can go ahead and maybe look at something like this. So I might have gotten an email, something like this, that says, hey, you've been invited to join this project. Let's go ahead and download the recorder. Now, this link to this recorder here is actually that MSI package, right? So a couple things generally happen here. Either I have the ability to install it and record myself, or maybe there are some stipulations in my organization. Some organizations don't let you install, your own packages on your machine. So maybe this is where I actually say, hey, IT, can you go help me install this for me? We have seen that happen before as well. And we have a ton of documentation around what it means to install and what are the privacy issues and things you might want to look at. Now, once I've installed it, we can see here, actually, let me pop it open in my actual machine, that when I pop open task mining, I'm going to have to authenticate myself. Now, authenticating myself is really just telling it that, hey, I am who I said I was. And I, for example, am Christina. And I've authenticated myself to say, yes, this is me on the recorder. So you can see here that I have like the icon of the recorder. And I've actually already authenticated myself. So you can see I just had to log into Automation Cloud, and I have the opportunity to capture my task as is, which is assisted task mining. Or if I've been added to an unassisted task mining project, I would be able to do that there. But in this example, I haven't. Now, the key here is going to be the types of data and the amount of data that you want to collect. Now, we do have some recommended amounts of data that we recommend. Now, every click and type that you're collecting is going to be considered an action. So that means every time Christina clicks or types in an application while we're recording, it's going to be collected as an action. The recommended is around 50,000. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, but generally 50,000 is a couple weeks of recording for a team. And you can see here as she would be, interacting with this and authenticating herself and starting to capture the data, we would actually see the data here and informations populate. Before we even do that, though, one thing to really note is some of the configurations you want to do before you even start that recording. So right off the bat, maybe I just create the project and I wait to invite folks. One of the things is PII masking. Now, obviously, as we're clicking and typing, we're collecting screenshots. That's really what we're collecting here with this recorder. So we want to make sure that if PII is of concern to you or PHI is of concern to you, that you go ahead and enable the PII masking. It's on by default. I didn't allow or deny anything here. So it's saying, hey, your recording list is empty. You really need to go ahead and add some applications because that's what's going to dictate what we capture. So this is another opportunity to allow or deny, just like we did at the creation of the project. And then lastly is some of the data collection policies. Now, one thing we do offer by default is consent. This again helps with building that confidence for somebody like Christina to say, hey, I've consented. I know when it's recording. It's not just recording silently in the background. Another thing that we commonly enable is anonymizing the usernames. At the end of the day, we want to focus on the productivity of the process and the task, not on the individual user's productivity. And so we frequently enable this so that we just anonymize them. It says user 1 or user 2 rather than Christina and Nooper. Once I've set up these policies here, I really want to make sure that I'm looking at the right people being captured over the right period of time. So again, I'm going to work with these people, Christina and her team offline, and I'm going to say, hey, I really want to understand more about your invoice processing flow. I know you guys do it in different forms throughout the day, but I really want to just go ahead and look at this. She might say, hey, I have more invoices that we process at month end than I usually do. So let's focus on, targeting some of the data capture at month end. Let's maybe also focus on the morning time because I think I've got most folks working on that kind of work at the morning time. So we've talked to the business to me to get that understanding. Once we've done that and she's consented, that's when this start recording can be enabled. Now, this is really the key here. This is the difference between assisted or unassisted task mining. Unassisted task mining, the admin can start the recording right away. That means that if I've authenticated here, this becomes kind of also blue, the mine multiple tasks, and it starts capturing that data. Again, only capturing for things that I've allowed explicitly those applications. As we're capturing data, we have a continuous upload. So it's streaming data directly from that person's machine to this cloud server here, and it's going to start populating this bar and start saying, hey, you've got 10,000 actions, you've got 12,000 actions. It'll let you continue to review it. Now I'm just going to go to an example where I already have some data loaded so you can see what this looks like. So we've got 15,000 actions recorded over 15 hours. This is something we actually use internally a robot for. So you can see there's a few different people, but for the most part, it was really just 1 or 2 people recording. And you can see the data and the information around how much they've recorded. Now, at any point here, I could start or I could stop, I could pause, I could start recording for specific users or stop for specific users. It's really about managing the expectations with the recording users as to how they're being interacting and how they're being captured. Now, the beauty of this is I can also do some data validation. Are people capturing the data I expected them to capture? So if I was looking at invoice processing, I'm expecting to see some documents, maybe SAP where they're inputting the invoice, and maybe some few other applications, but I'm not expecting to see too much outside of that. So if I see a ton of data, for example, in Salesforce, I might say, hey, I think I need to deny this. I don't know that this is the data that we necessarily need to focus on. Maybe it's some folks doing some one-off things. So this is going to start to populate right here to help you do some data validation right off the bat. It's really just looking at different kinds of applications and the levels of those applications in the recording time. Now, the key here is once I've hit the 50,000, or potentially you've just hit 10,000, which is the minimum. It's not the recommended, but it is the minimum to run analysis. I can go ahead and click Run Analysis. Now, what does that mean? Running analysis means you're going to leverage our AI pipeline to digest that data, all of those different thousands of actions, and you're going to then find the most repetitive workflows from it. Couple things to note here. This is actually the point in the use of the product that consumes AI units. Until now, we actually had not consumed any AI units. We were simply just collecting data to be able to view that data and validate it. This is when we run analysis, we actually consume those AI units or that cost at task mining, and then we get our output. Now, when we get our output, the key thing here is that folks generally have some preconceived notions around what they expect to see. So one of the biggest takeaways from us is, remember, this is an AI model that's looking at all those similarities and differences for you. So it's focusing on a couple things, right? It's focusing on really similar screens, really similar clicks and types or interactions on those similar screens, and frequency or the redundantness of it. Now, what you can see here is it populated a few different tasks. I'll actually go back with some data around each of those tasks. This is particularly helpful to your role as a business analyst, right? Because I want to use this data to help quantify whether or not there's potential ROI here. So what we do automatically is we rank them, and I actually have this one favorited, which is why it's at the top. But other than that, we rank them at the repeatability level. So we are actually helping you provide a list of the most repeatable tasks right off the bat. Now, tasks, again, is something that's defined by an AI algorithm. So that means that really what we're looking at is what you might define as a task, which is the end-to-end invoice processing flow, may not be a task here as part of task mining. Maybe the actual digitization of the invoice is what's considered a task, because what the AI pipeline told us is after you do that, you've moved on to the next step. Now, again, business step and task in an AI realm may be a little bit different. So the key here is to start digesting some of this information and looking at it. Right off the bat, what I usually do is I look at the filters because I want to look at the different users that are being outputted. It's not always going to be all of the users in the task output, as well as I want to look at the steps. Now, again, the data that was collected with this recorder that was running in the background were screenshots of every click and type. So each of those screenshots has been PI amassed, digested by the AI pipeline, and then segmented or grouped into different kinds of repetitive flows and steps. So we can see here that we can actually go through and see every single one of these clicks and types, and we can go ahead and follow each of the flows. Now, what's particularly interesting about this is that we also can see that there's some clear variation here. So each of these different tasks was grouped into different variants, which is really just by saying, hey, there was similar starts and ends here, but there were different things happening in the middle. Within those variants, we have this idea of traces. Traces is a distinct instance of somebody doing something. So an example of a trace might be a distinct instance of Christina going through invoice 1 from start to finish in invoice processing. So usually this is associated with a specific user, and we can see that user information. You can see, for example, this one was Ben who was completing it, and we can go ahead and see some of the information around it. Now, as we're going through and digesting this information, we might find in this example, which is Salesforce, hey, this took him only 2 minutes, but it looks like he used a workaround that I haven't seen before, right? Maybe he's using something like he's double clicking into this new note title or looking up a title, and I haven't seen that before. That's the kind of analysis that we're looking at. Now, it's particularly important to understand that building analysis skills can take a little bit of time, mostly because you're not going to be as familiar with the data because the business me is. And as a business analyst, your job is to get at least the high level information and then set them up for success to really drill down into it. So we've started by helping you get some of the high level information on the actual data here, as well as giving you the different flows. But generally what I look at is I look at the things that are the longest or the shortest, right? I'm looking for outliers because I want to pick out what's going on in those outliers. So I might look at something and say, hey, this one was the shortest one. I want to go ahead and look into this one specifically and go through the flow here. I might have some preconceived notions, right? Hey, we have an SLA. That means this process needs to finish in 3 minutes. Maybe we go filter for everything that's taking longer than 3 minutes so we can figure out what's going on here. This is all about expectation setting with the business. This is the point in which I would say, hey, you've collected the data, you've done the work to collect the data. Let's make sure that our expectations around what you're looking for are really clearly understood, because that is what's going to dictate success here. Now, if we're looking for outliers, well, great. Yeah, we can use the filters to do that. If we're looking for happy paths, we just want to find the most common things that people are doing. Maybe we go look at the top variants here and we go find the happy paths from there. And this one seems to have the most coverage. It's missing a few top and bottom, but it has most of the coverage. Maybe I flow through this one and I say, hey, the average execution time was significantly longer. Let's go figure out what's going on here. But this is all about expectation setting throughout the way of analyzing that data. Now, across the board in every interaction, you're going to have the opportunity to edit these. Now, the reason why most folks are editing them is because they're wanting to output it in some way or drive some actionability from it. So let's just say in this example, I decided I wanted to focus on this trace. This trace was the trace that seems like the happy path. I want to use it as a training or onboarding method. I want to automate for it maybe because it's the most frequent thing that folks are doing. I can edit each of the step names. I can also go ahead and edit the trace information, and I can go through and export it. Now, exporting it is really what's going to drive that actionability. This is what's going to take my insights from this tool and make it more available to my COE. So I might say, hey, I want to take it into Automation Hub, or I want to create a PDD. I want to take it directly into Studio and get some developers to take a look at it. Or I actually just want all of the raw data, or you may be looking at this data in Power BI in our third-party tool. I want to go ahead and look at it there. So you have a couple different options. Now, this can be done at a multitude of different levels. We were looking at the individual trace level, but we might also export our data at the entire task level, which is really by another way of saying, hey, the AI told us that these different instances were grouped together and folks are doing all these things in a similar way. Let's go digitize and analyze this information elsewhere. Generally, what we're seeing in this process is folks are, again, starting with the most repetitive ones and then moving from there. They might go into favoriting a few, renaming the tasks, as you can see here, updating the status to say that the review is in progress or that it's been identified as a potential RPA candidate. And then they're conveying that to their COE or their business leaders by exporting it into that PDD or by furthermore taking it into Automation Hub. Ton of information here. I'm going to pause really quick and go back and just do a quick review. So what we did is we had this idea that we looked at a group of finance and accounting folks, and we wanted to know exactly how they were doing some of their work. Now, we didn't necessarily approach this as, hey, we know exactly what you're doing. We know exactly that you're doing invoice processing. Instead, we said, hey, I'm kind of interested in invoice processing, but I want to know what you do in general at month end. We identified those folks here, invited them. We were very specific and thoughtful with who we invited. We set up our settings like our PI masking, the allow and deny to set some scope and configuration around the data that we're collecting, and we enabled consent. This then sent them invitations to be able to get this recorder. Now, this recorder is what's actually going to be capturing. So we might go ahead and click start, and it's going to be capturing in the background as they do their day-to-day actions. Now, what it's capturing is each of those actions here, specifically, and actions being defined as every click and type, and we're taking screenshots of those clicks and types. Now, the technology in the background is basically going to look at that, OCR it, or digitize it, and it's going to output it, again, from an AI pipeline with the most repetitive flows. Now, you can see here, for example, I had 4 or 5 users that were being captured, but all of these tasks actually only span one user. Now, that's another example of AI finding a repetitive flow, but it being specific to one user. What that usually means is that either one user had, significantly more data that they outputted than the others, or what it means is that the AI just found that their data, for example, mine in this set, might be the most repetitive, most material flows. So what I'm going to do is go through and click through this and see, is that really what's true and how I analyze it? One thing to call out as far as a tool goes, we do have an analysis guide on our docs that outlines a lot of the pieces I'm talking about here of, reviewing the images and reviewing the data. But we do have an analysis guide that helps you look at it from a perspective of a BA that's new to the business process. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving here. Now, we talked about how there were 2 different kinds of approaches to a task mining here, right? So we looked at assisted and we looked at unassisted. Now, we've covered unassisted. We looked at actually more of a top-down approach, somebody like an admin or a business leader, a BA, applying this idea of capturing data to a group of people. But we might consider it a little bit from the bottoms-up approach, which is, hey, I know what the task is. I maybe have some ideas, or my team have some ideas. I want to go and capture them. So that's an assisted task mining project. For those of you that have used task capture before, this is going to look somewhat familiar. It's a similar flow, but it's distinct traces or instances of somebody completing it. Now we can see here that I could actually start my own task capture on my own. So the primary difference here is that, again, because it's a bottoms-up approach, as a recording user, I have a little bit more leeway to say exactly what I want to go ahead and capture. So I might create a new project, or I might interact to give data in an existing project, and then I'm going to do this consent. Again, this consent is automatically turned on for ATM or assisted task mining, but this was something we could have enabled or disabled for unassisted task mining, and that's up to you. Now, as we're looking at this, what this is going to do is, again, as soon as I click start, it's going to get all of those clicks and types. So because it's going to do this right away, one thing I want to do is make sure that my environment is all set up and ready to go. So let's just say that, my task at hand was actually to go into a browser, and it was to Google something for whatever reason. Maybe this is just a replication of our invoice processing flow. Once I've done that, I'm going to have this ready to go, because as soon as this clicks start, it's going to get all of those clicks and types. And I'm going to look up maybe what the New York City weather is looking like today. And you can see as I'm doing all of those interactions, it's collecting actions here for all of those clicks and types. Now it's going to look at the active window. So folks that have multiple monitors or things like that, it's going to look at the active window. Now throughout any of this process, I can pause, I can add descriptions or annotations. This is really driving the business me to be in charge of what they want to look at and what they want to capture. Now, once we've done that, let's just say this was the end of our process, we'll go ahead and click end. It is a continuous upload that is pretty much streaming right off the bat. So it's going to start uploading that data directly into that project. Now, I uploaded to a different project. We don't need to worry about that. That was really just for demo purposes. But this is the kind of output I might get, which is a grouping of all of the different steps I took based off those clicks and types with screenshots of all of the different interactions. Now you can see here that PII masking was enabled by default, and I didn't do anything to change that. Now PII masking is enabled by default for all assisted task mining projects. We are offering in a new release coming up in a few months the ability to turn it off if folks like, but what we found is that for the most part, people do want things to be masked. Now what's key here is that I could do this 7 different times. I could have gone and looked up the weather, 7 different websites for New York City. I could have also just looked up different kinds of interactions for that invoice processing, but I also could be different people. So maybe I say, hey, Christina, I think you do it this way. Can you go ahead and capture something? So we might invite Christina to go ahead and capture this. I might say, hey, I'm looking at invoice processing. I want to go see if we can automate it. Can you capture one of the examples of you processing an invoice? She's going to get a similar email to what we already saw, and she's going to get that installer link as well. As soon as she authenticates herself, it's going to pop up here to say, hey, do you want to capture that task? Now, the key here is then going to be, what will we do after we get all of these different variations? Well, once we have these variations, realistically for an automation, we need to understand all of them together because we want our robot or our automation in general to cover all of the different variations. So this is where the value add of assisted task mining really deviates from, that historical stuff that we had for task capture and adds new value. We might actually do something called auto merging or guided merge, which is really taking all of these different instances or variations, traces, and merging them together. Now, guided merge is basically meaning that we can go ahead and say, hey, we know the process. Let us piece together the things that are similar and not similar. And then let us compare them. And then let us look at this and say, hey, we want to go and bring together this service now is the same thing as this service now. So let's go ahead and append this or merge this together. But auto merge is saying, hey, I don't want to do that. I'm not as familiar with it as a BA because I'm not the business me. I'm going to use auto merge to go ahead or use AI to go ahead and find those similarities and differences for me. So I might go ahead and kick that off. Now I already have one kicked off here, and you can see here the different kinds of interactions, but maybe it identifies that, hey, those ServiceNow screens were actually not the different screens. They were the same ones. It was somebody logging into ServiceNow. And these are what the different interactions for the decision points look like. Now, this is the key on your role, is to provide some of the detail that helps us digest this information. So you would be working with the business me as a business analyst to go ahead and say, hey, this is actually the condition of going to an extra screen, which is maybe going to the EMEA ServiceNow page. Whereas the other flows are for non-EMEA ServiceNow. And we know that because we looked at the different interactions here, and it's going to auto-save that. I'm going to keep adding detail. Now, beyond this, I can always rename even the entire flow. So I might rename this and drop the Google Chrome because not everybody uses Google Chrome in this example, something like that. Or I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, hey, I actually want to edit this image because I want to go ahead and add a red box around priority because people always forget to look at priority, and I want to make sure that the automation does that. So I might go ahead and add a red box around it. So being able to edit, blur, and modify things is also something that you can do here. Now, the reason why we didn't start with assisted task mining is because this is something that's a little bit newer. It's also only available in the cloud. So one of the things we generally say is, yes, if you can start with assisted task mining, we definitely recommend doing this. Now, it's just an easier way to go ahead and get hands-on experience with the recorder and with the data capture, as well as the analysis portion. But if you can't, because maybe you're on premise, you're on Automation Suite, you would start with the unassisted task mining, which is what I showed you earlier. A key piece on pricing and licensing just to be aware of is that assisted task mining is basically available to all different kinds of licenses and doesn't really have additional cost. So the key here is that this is a lot easier to socialize within your organization as a quick and easy thing to get started with, rather than unassisted task mining that might have some AI units attached to it. It was a ton of information. So just a quick review here, and this is a piece around, really what the certification focuses on as well. The unassisted task mining pieces that we went through right off the bat, we're selecting our users, collecting that data, making sure that they've done the, validation to analyze the data, visualizing it and exporting it as we get ready for automation. Now, key points of this that you would still do for assisted task mining, you would still select and collect your data. You'd probably analyze a little bit later, and you'd visualize first to go ahead and look at those different activities. But the same thing here is that you go back in, you can still export all of these traces or your merge traces to Automation Hub, to Studio, to different images, or to a PDD, a Word example as well. So all of this really drives continuous discovery from data collection on the desktop recorder to analyzing that data to meet rich insights all the way into actionability. Now, before I pause and open it up to questions, I am just going to go back here really quick and remind you of where we started, which was this idea that we have all these different data sources, and we want to go ahead and bring them together into Automation Hub. So what we reviewed predominantly today was process mining, which was looking at the source of the data directly from the application. And then what I just reviewed with you was examples of running that data from an actual desktop recorder. And then one of the things that you'll probably see, in future sessions is comms mining, as well as then taking all of this into a centralized place for Automation Hub. So I'm going to go ahead and pause. Christina, is there anything if you've had a chance to look at the chat that I haven't covered that we should
Yeah,
talk about?
so I think we have two main questions. The first one is how we are able to convince our organization that we can install task mining and that doesn't cause any friction in terms of security and things like that. So how we are able to frame that
Mhm.
task mining is helping us.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really common question that we get in organizations. Now, a couple things I do right off the bat. One of the things that I do right off the bat is I make sure that they understand that we're looking at distinct processes or tasks. We're not looking at the user individually. We want to get towards more of an automation productivity level. So it's about socializing the idea in itself. The second piece is then going to be about the consent and the anonymization of the usernames. So you want to make sure that you're saying, hey, I'm only going to enable this after you've given consent. You have the interaction to be able to go say yes or no to this. And I'm also going to anonymize the data that comes from you. Instead of Christina, it might say user 1 or user 2, right? And then the third piece is then the allow and deny, especially if you're using unassisted task mining. Explicitly denying applications that people are worried about is a really easy way to build a little bit more confidence. Hey, I'm not going to go look at your Slack. We've explicitly denied the recorder to even capture that data. So it's around putting scope and expectations around what the data that we're collecting is, and then building from there an understanding of, this is the end goal. We're trying to get towards a productivity analysis of the task, not of the team or the individual user, but more of where we can go ahead and automate for. I did see a question that I want to jump to really quick in the chat because I want to make sure that we touch on it, which is the difference between task capture and task mining. This can be a little confusing, and we're very aware of our confusing naming. We're working on it. But task capture is actually the origin technology that really introduced recording of desktop activities. So we actually inherited task capture years ago. And what we did then is take that evolutionary step to go take that data from that recorder and analyze it with AI. So think of task mining as almost an evolution of task capture. Now, we do have folks that still use task capture, and you're more than welcome to use task capture. The difference is that task capture is really just going to be the front half of what I showed you today, which is capturing a process, this clicks and types. It's not going to have the AI component. It's not going to have the component where you can be collaborative in the web experience, especially if you're in the cloud. So what we've seen generally folks be doing is if they had been in the task capture realm, they're moving over to assisted task mining, just because assisted task mining has all the pieces of task capture plus some added value as well. They are technically all within one umbrella product area, but they are separate products. Good questions. Any other questions or topics we need to check on?
So Nupur, I think there were a couple of questions about the project. We really want people just to focus on the content right now. We'll be talking a little bit more about the projects next week. The projects are not going to go into really deep detail. They're going to be kind of high level. So we really need you guys just to focus on your lessons. And we know there's a lot that you need to do with your self-study. So if you guys just focus on that, we have it kind of designed to kind of give you what you need starting next week.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And also, as I said, like as you go through self-study, as Diana said, and through the academy assignments, you will also get practical exercises there. So you'll have much more insight, like in the use cases and the practical side of it after you will complete the academy assignment. For example, for this week, it will be much easier for you. But for now, as Diana said, please just focus on the live session, then Wednesday onwards to Sunday for the academy assignment. And at the end, we'll get to the project. So just bit by bit, so you don't get overwhelmed or scared by the quantity or how difficult this is. I know today seemed maybe a bit more difficult because we stepped into like real product usage, but it's not as difficult as it seems. And once you get through today's session, Wednesday sessions, and the academy assignment, you will have like a complete overview of task mining and process mining for the week. So don't worry.
For sure. One thing I'll just add to that is obviously the Academy team has provided you with plenty of content and information, but from a product side, we do have product docs available that are publicly available. You're more than welcome to go through those. We also have product demos available. So similar use cases that we showed you today, there should be videos on the UiPath YouTube that have process mining and task mining specific use cases and how to get started, just so you can also gauge some of the content related to a specific use case. So you're more than welcome to check those out. They're all publicly available.
I will try to share some links for them in the chat for product documentation and the intro videos, as well as you said, from our YouTube repository. For now, maybe we can open up the Q&A then. No, Diana?
Yeah, so if anybody would like to take themselves off mute and ask any questions. We had just a couple come through. Hold on. For client applications which operate in a secured network, say for example, defense projects, what additional layer of security does UiPath provide in addition to masking PII?
Yeah, great question. So really this is going to be dictating on your architecture. So for example, if you are on premise or you're an automation suite, you have a few different options to, decide on your blob storage and looking at how the access to the actual screenshots is going to be. Beyond the PII masking though, predominantly what we're looking at is again, the allow and deny, as well as looking at different availability for what users you actually give governance and access to. I think Kendrick also had a question here. I see a raised hand.
Yes, okay. Good evening or hello everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to ask you to just unpack the cost related to all these mining tools. For example, to me as a BA, the business analysis, and to the company, say as a consultant, I'll be assisting.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. I can start with task mining and then kick it off to Christina for process mining. So on the task mining side, we do predominantly use AI units as a costing mechanism. So two things we generally look at are if you're on a platform tier. So if you're in an enterprise organization and you've purchased UiPath, you're usually on a platform tier. If you're on a platform tier of licensing, then you automatically have access to pretty much unlimited assisted task mining. For unassisted task mining, you may get a segment of AI units already with that platform tier. And then really every analysis that you run. So every time I click that run analysis button where I'm using the AI for unassisted task mining, it consumes 5,000 AI units. So that's just really where you'll see the consumption go down from there. And it's up to you as to how much or how frequently you want to run that. But it is just 5,000 per consumption of the AI units.
So in dollars, is it?
So that's going to depend, right? So that's going to depend on your licensing as well as the package that you go with. So
Okay.
that would be something that your organization would need to work out with our go-to-market team and your account executive, because it can vary, I think, depending on the package and depending on the partnership. But really, what you're looking at is probably on the licensing page. You can see the way that we map out AI units to actual cost of dollars or whatever it might be.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, on the process mining side, basically we are normally licensing the number of users and the types of users. So right now we have a business user license and then we have a developer license. There are currently different prices for these particular types of users. And for process mining, there is a minimum requirement to have a bundle that covers 20 million rows. So whenever we are thinking about a row, we are thinking about an event that is in your data. So the 20 million row is the minimum one, and then you are just going up in increments of 20 millions.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the group?
I think the ones in the chat, I think you guys have responded to. And I just want to take a minute to thank you, Nupur and Christina.
There is a question from Shraddha has been raised.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Shraddha. Do you want to unmute yourself?
great session before and Christina.
Can't really hear you, Shraddha.
A bit louder, Shraddha. Can you hear us?
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. So I have a question, like if we are driving digital transformation within our own organization, then it is easy to get these applications installed on the SME's computer. But what if we are going to a client outside our organization? So experience point of view, how difficult it is to convince them to help us, in these mining activities.
Yeah. That's a great question. So from the task mining perspective, you're right. It does add a bottleneck if it's not your own organization, you're working for a partner and you have to install this on somebody else's organization. The primary thing here is really going to be, I think, working with their IT administrators to make sure that they understand what the security and privacy protocols are. And that's why we make our docs pretty bulky on some of the information. So the two places I always take people are, one is the actual hardware requirements, making sure that machines are able to really take in the data streaming. And then the second is going to be the actual component around, the IT policies somebody might have in their organization and making sure that you can get them the information they need to be able to bypass those or, look at it pretty quickly and get it installed onto folks. So the takeaway is I would say your new best friend is the IT administrator of whatever that organization is, because they're the person that's going to help you get that recorder on the desktops as soon as possible. And really what will help you with them is that buy-in from the business as well. I think we had a question, Praharsha. Do you want to go ahead and unmute?
So what are the key benefits of UiPath task capture in the process automation workflow?
So task capture and both task mining help us map out the process flow of the clicks and types, right? So the key benefit is then replicating the human behavior and putting it in a way that the robot can understand or the automation can understand. And so not only does it quickly map out what the process flow is, but it helps you find, right, the different variations and the potential bottlenecks. So it's a micro level view. So if we say that process mining is looking at the higher level view, then the lower level view, the micro level view, is looking at the actual clicks and types, so that when you decide to automate, you can say, hey, robot, these are the different interactions I need you to have across the board of the different applications so that we can go ahead and automate for it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Great
Thank
question.
you for clarifying.
Sorry, Prasha, you just Praharsha. Yeah, you had some more question. Please go ahead.
No, I didn't have any other question.
Tell me something more about you. We are really happy to see you. Just give me your background, okay?
Means I'm a RPA developer and I have 2 years of experience in RPA and I've done over 150 to 160 projects in RPA UiPath and I've completed the business analyst and associate certification in UiPath and also I have like 5 diplomas remaining to complete the advanced RPA developer certification as well.
Love you
That's
so much.
amazing.
It's really awesome to see you. Thank you so much. Where are you from? And what are you studying?
I'm studying in 7th class and I'm from Hyderabad.
You're from Hyderabad. Awesome. This is the best example. I think I can just see that in our entire group. And thank you for your ambition of getting into the RPA. Really love you so much, the energy and the curiosity. Really awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, good. Go ahead, Nupur. I'm sorry. It was so excitement by looking at him. I just jumped into that. Sorry about it.
No
Please go ahead.
problem.
All is yours.
This is awesome. So really happy to hear it. I think we're just about at time, Diana, actually. So that was all we had from our content. Is there anything else from your team?
Yeah, just a reminder that if your question was not asked or answered today, you can do that on the forum. Nupur and Christina, just want to really thank you. Thank you for keeping up with all the questions. This was really an insightful session. And so You guys need to finish your self-study by the end of the week, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Guys, you have the link to the forum in the chat, and you'll get everything you need in the wrap-up email. And the assignment will be given on Wednesday, so you no need to think about that till then. So yeah, very good session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Very
Bye.
good session.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.